Well, I just manhandled the transmission back into this thing to kind of gauge for exhaust clearance. That's what I'm working on right now. Again, I'm using the factory front half of the 2001-2002 M3 headers, which I cut off before the catalytic converter. And I've been fabbing up a Y pipe along the way that'll fit and clear. And then I'm going to do V-bands. So I actually took both of these things out of the car. I welded it outside of the car, and then I actually cut between the two. You can see the cut right down in there. And I'm going to put a V-band to separate the forward and rear headers so I can actually get them out of the car without basically undoing the engine mount and a whole bunch of other stuff like is out of the way right now. But unfortunately, I'm still waiting on a lot of parts. All of the brakes are back on and together. I had remanufactured calipers for all four corners. I ended up getting sent the wrong rear, so I had to wait another week, but that's all back together. I have new hard lines on the top, which I'll show you in just a second. They come in straight like that, and you gotta bend them to shape, which is real fun. I have a 318i master cylinder up in there from a parts car. I bought a brand new 325e master, but it didn't come quite fast enough, and I'm impatient, so. That's in there, all plumbed in. It's bolted to the massive delete piece up there. I guess I'll drop the car down and just show, well, I have to move the welder, so I'll start a new segment here in just a second. I'll show you the top side. All right, back to the top side. A couple things have changed up here. You can see the two metal hard lines that go to the master cylinder. Those are new. I bent them by hand. I don't really have a pipe bender, so they're not the prettiest things in the world, but you know, they're pretty close and they'll do the job. I bought factory 325i rods, which are not quite long enough to completely delete the booster, but they're way closer. So that's what I've been dealing with here. I actually figured out my clutch master cylinder leaks like a sieve. We got this all hooked back together, and I kept pouring brake fluid in, and it was just eating up in the reservoir. So looked inside and the carpet's all wet with brake fluid, so that was not a happy moment. However, it's all disconnected now, so have time to sort that out. I ordered just a new master, a new little plastic elbow, a new hose, all that stuff. I just don't want to mess around with it anymore. So intake manifold's back off just to kind of get a better view of everything. You can see the transmission's on it. It's got a brand new clutch kit on it now. That finally showed up. What else? The e30 M3 expansion bottle. I bought a new overflow hose as well. I'm actually going to need to go a bit further here because it has to go over to this side for the new radiator. And this normally mounts like this right here. But as you can see, the mouth basically hits the coil cover. So I'm gonna make a few brackets and mount it. It's basically a 45-degree angle right up here, as high as I can make it. And then that'll join with this hose right here. Should be decent. Not perfectly ideal, but it's a lot better than it could be. Top view of the headers again. Can't see a whole lot. They're turning out pretty well. Get these O2s out of the way here. They're a lot of work. The front section's by far the hardest, just getting it all to clearance properly and make sure it's not leaking and all that stuff. I'm not an expert welder by any stretch, but I can make stuff that doesn't leak at least, so. Again, I'm going to be using V-band clamps for that just because they're so quick and so clean. They'll always come apart no matter how many miles are on them. It's one bolt. It's really, really nice, so. I'm waiting on those. I have 3-inch ones in stock, but this is a 2.5-inch system up on the headers, and it'll probably go to a single 3-inch. We'll see. I have some flexibility, so. This is still going to be a street car, so if I have to go 2.5 all the way back with very little restriction, that is just fine as well. What else? So the transmission's more or less back in right now. New rear brakes too. The rotors were sitting in my storage unit for quite a while, so they look like crap. But, oh, and I'm just realizing I never changed the throwout bearing. So that transmission's got an old throwout bearing in it, but it didn't make noise, so I guess that's okay. All the wheel liners. I have An original fuel filter that mounts down just in front of the left rear wheel. I've got this one with the 5-bar regulator that mounts on the frame rail under the car. This is for the S54 because it's a non-return fuel system, which means basically fuel comes in through the filter and it's all regulated here and it returns here. So it only has one line that actually goes to the rail. A lot of fuel injection systems, in fact I'd say most up until fairly recently, are return. So you have the filter, kind of like this one, goes all the way up to the rail, and then the rail operates at pressure, and then it has a regulator in the back of it, and then it dumps back from the rail. So there are advantages to this system. I don't think they're really appreciable, but it is what it is. I've got a new intake transfer pump, new molded hose between the high pressure pump and the filter, new pressure pump. I think I went with a Hag pump. They're made in USA. They're not China. They're not German, so it's kind of a half ground. e30 I think is USA too, but I'm not sure. New hose clamps because just don't mess around with it. Here's that new clutch master feed hose. Stuff's just coming in. There's the master cylinder I didn't end up using. Pressure plate bolts. Box of gloves, that's really important. Got my new muffler in that box. Sitting down in here. The transmission mount's not in place yet, so that's why that's sitting so low. And you can see the wet shop towel down there, probably soaking in brake fluid. Oh yeah. I think I'll put a couple more down there. The carpet should be okay, as long as it doesn't seep through it. That's what I'm mainly worried about, not rusting this car out any further. But yeah, it's coming along, but man, waiting for parts and just finding stuff that you need. You can't just have a list and order it all at once and go through and do it with a project like this, so. A lot of trial and error, but we'll get there. I'm guessing probably still, at this rate, maybe a month before it's even trying to start here, so. Yeah, doesn't even have oil in it yet. Still a neat car though, and I'm planning on keep plugging away even though full-time job, and the fact that the car is 40 miles away from my house, not ideal. So stay tuned. I will keep making these as much as I possibly can, but sorry for the lulls in between and the relatively slow pace of this project. So I have a couple things just sort of sitting in place. I've got the plenum back on the throttle body. Oop, ripped a glove. I have an e46 M3 K&N cold air intake, which fits like it was meant to be in here. I bought this for my red car before I did the swap, and I never ended up using it because I've got the CSL box on it. But glad I have it because it fits great. Again, a lot more clearance down here. Sorry, it's hard to see those, but those are the two -10 connectors for this oil cooler. I have to cut these short and put the 45-degree fittings on them, but plenty of room. Sneak down below the nose panel. And then these lines with the 90 fittings sit like that, and then I will make brackets to mount the oil cooler right about there. The M3 front bumper has a perfect little spot right in the middle for that oil cooler, so it gets really good flow. And I mean, the S54 is provisioned for it from the factory, so it makes sense to use it. I am going to run the original radiator, which came with the car when I bought it. This is not an S14 radiator. This is a 96 M3 radiator, so it's a little bit bigger. This one's a pretty new Nissan's unit, so OE, good quality, a lot of cooling capacity. Pardon me. Whew. I have the 318i M42 radiator in the red car, and that works just fine as well. But this is already set up for it, and you know, I already have the tank and all that, so I may as well do it. Power steering, the pump I bought is fundamentally the same with a different bracket as the 97 to 99 E36 328 323 pump. It's a Luke LF30. It's also the same as some E46s. The M3 power steering pressure line's got a giant cooler in it, which I don't want. And this custom hose is for the old ZF style pump that was on the earlier S52s. So the banjo fitting's just a little bit too small and it's a little too short. So that's something I'm not really too concerned about right now. I'm probably just gonna have a pair of those made at a hydraulic shop or something, because my red car also is having issues with that. So power steering's pretty easy to sort. Still have to get some bolts for the pump, and I gotta clean it up a little bit. That's a salvage yard pump, since lo and behold, the salvage yard I bought this engine from screwed me. They didn't give me any accessories, even though it was part of the deal. So lots and lots of stuff. I got the alternator over there in a bin. That's got an underdrive pulley on it, so I'm hoping that the belt still fits. I've got to trim these hoses down again and put these 45-degree fittings on there. A little bit better fit. These are all reusable, super duper nice. This stainless hose is a bitch to deal with, though. You're gonna end up poking yourself with stainless steel wire and bleeding quite a bit, but stuff's up for a lot of pressure and holds up really well. So, and it looks really cool. So if you want to look like you have an official build, get a whole bunch of AN. Let's see here. I also have to cap off this. That is originally for the brake booster on the M3. I'll have to replace this with a bit of hose over to the CCV. This is idle air control. That's currently off of the car, but it slips down under there and it connects to the plenum on the other side for filtered air. Yeah, this e30 M3 plastic return hose is gonna be perfect. I just have to get a little more capillary, run it right over there, bam. So I'm thinking this is definitely the way to go. Maybe even better than the M42 radiator. Not as simple, but definitely a higher capacity cooling system. And overall, probably just better peace of mind. The e36 M3 lower hose fits just fine. The upper probably does as well. I'm gonna order one and see how it fits. The car had a cut apart one with a sensor in it before, which is really, really janky. I'm not putting that back on, but get a brand new one and shove it in there and see what's what. On the 318 radiator, I use like a 76 Ford Econoline upper hose because it's just a nice, big, thick 90. But on this one, it's going to be different. So I'll let you guys know what I find on that. But right now, just sort of clearancing. Booster delete fits really nice. You have to break 3 little plastic tabs off the back of the plenum box to get that to fit. Your heater lines, you're going to have to... I don't know, you have to do a little something with that. The top one actually hits the plenum a little bit. The engine's not fully bolted down in my car yet, so I'm hoping I get a little more clearance, but I think I'm gonna have to cut just a little bit and probably get a molded 90-degree hose to get heat back. So little stuff like that just reassures you and reminds you that this engine is not supposed to be in this car. But I couldn't resist test fitting a couple of parts and making it look a little more complete. I'm probably going to do the pressure fuel pump, a couple of fuel hoses, and the filter underneath right now. So maybe I'll have another short little segment before I sign off here for the night, but yay. Well, there's the original hardware. That filter looks pretty ancient. That pump actually looks fantastic. It's got the original clamp on it, so I'm guessing that is indeed original. Makes me almost not want to touch it, but those hoses, that filter, are gonna go away. Those are pretty gross. And the fuel lines are, well, the evap line's pretty gross, but I'm not really using that in my swap setup anyway. Hard line's like really, really nice. Normally that long filter I showed you earlier mounts right here in the E46. I actually mounted it on the frame rail up in front on the red car, and I'm not really sure, looking at this, where is best to mount it on this car. Maybe right between the motor mount arm and the frame rail up there, just so it's got enough room to loop up and return. But we will see. Here's beginnings of the exhaust work. I gotta make that into a Y-pipe. My welds, again, aren't that pretty, but they don't leak, so that's fine. Transmission's back in place. Shifter is almost there. Lots of fun stuff. Still have to put the drive shaft back in it and some other junk, but again, for the most part, this thing is coming right along. So probably save fuel system and all that for next time, just because those clamps are pretty disgusting looking and I'm getting a little tired.